Before we continue, if you listened to my first story, you already know that my father collapsed on our kitchen floor that cold winter evening. For 70 years, I've tried to forget the sound my mother made when she screamed his name. But some memories never grow old. They simply learn how to hide. Come closer, my sweethearts. Because tonight, I'm taking you back to the night that stole my childhood forever. The moment my father fell, time seemed to stop. His coffee mug shattered across the kitchen floor. Mother dropped to her knees beside him. "James!" She gently lifted his head into her lap. There was no answer, only silence. The kind of silence that makes your heart pound so loudly you can't hear anything else. I remember standing frozen in the doorway. I was only 9 years old. I wanted to help. I wanted to be brave. But my legs refused to move. Then Mother looked at me. Not with panic, not with fear, with determination. "Eleanor, run to Mr. Jenkins, tell him. We need help." Those words woke me from my fear. I threw on my old coat, ran barefoot through the snow, and prayed the whole way. I'd never prayed that hard before. "Please, God, don't take my father." The icy wind cut across my face. The snow burned my feet. I stumbled, fell, got back up, and kept running. Every second felt like an hour. When I reached Mr. Jenkins' farmhouse, I pounded on the door with both fists. He opened it almost immediately. His face changed the moment he saw mine. "Eleanor? What happened?" I couldn't catch my breath. "My father. He fell. Please come." He didn't ask another question. He grabbed his truck keys, called for his wife, and within moments, we were racing back toward our house. By the time we arrived, several neighbors had already gathered. Someone had called the town doctor. Mother still hadn't left Father's side. She was holding his hand, whispering softly into his ear, as though love alone could keep him with us. The doctor examined him quietly. The room became so still, I could hear the ticking of our old wall clock. Finally, the doctor stood. He removed his glasses and looked directly at my mother. "I'm afraid. His heart is very weak." Those words hit the room like thunder. The doctor explained that years of overworking, skipping meals, and carrying too much stress had finally caught up with him. "He needs complete rest. No heavy lifting. No carpentry. No long hours." Mother nodded, but I saw the fear in her eyes. Because we all knew the truth. If Father couldn't work, who would feed us? Who would pay the bank? Who would save our home? That night, I lay awake listening to the wind outside. Every creak of the house made me wonder, would we lose it? Every cough from Father's bedroom made me wonder, would he still be alive in the morning? For the first time, the future frightened me more than the dark. I held Father's handwritten note tightly in my hands, the one that read, "Never lose this heart, Ellie." I whispered those words over and over, trying to believe them myself. The next morning, the sun rose just like every other day. Birds sang outside the window. Neighbors walked past our house. Children laughed on their way to school. The world looked exactly the same, but inside our little home, nothing would ever be the same again, because before that week was over, I would make a decision that no 9-year-old child should ever have to make, and that decision would shape the rest of my life. When you're 9 years old, people expect you to worry about homework, playing outside, or what you'll get for Christmas. I was worried about something else. Whether we'd have enough money to buy bread. Whether my father would survive another week. Whether the bank would come back for our house. Childhood had quietly slipped away. Father stayed in bed most days. The doctor had been very clear. No lifting, no working, no stress. But every morning, I'd catch him staring out the bedroom window toward his old workshop. His tools were still hanging on the wall. His unfinished projects were covered in dust. I could tell what he was thinking. A carpenter who couldn't build felt like a bird that couldn't fly. Mother never complained. She simply worked longer. She washed clothes for neighbors, cleaned houses, sewed dresses late into the night. Sometimes I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and hear the steady rhythm of her sewing machine. She thought everyone was asleep. She didn't know. I heard every stitch, every sigh, every quiet prayer. One afternoon after school, I stopped outside Mrs. Carter's bakery. The warm smell of fresh bread drifted onto the sidewalk. She noticed me standing there. "Eleanor, would you like a cookie?" I smiled. "Thank you." As I reached for it, I noticed an older boy carrying heavy flour sacks into the bakery. Mrs. Carter looked exhausted. Without thinking, I asked, "Do you need help?" She laughed softly. "You'd help me? I can sweep. I can clean tables. I can wash dishes. I'll work hard. She studied my face for a long moment, then she nodded. I can pay you 50 cents every Saturday. 50 cents. To most people, it wasn't much. To me, it sounded like a miracle. That Saturday became my first real job. I arrived before sunrise, swept the floors, stacked bread trays, wrapped warm loaves in brown paper, washed dishes until my fingers turned red. It wasn't easy. By noon, my arms ached, my feet hurt. But when Mrs. Carter placed 2 shiny quarters into my hand, I felt richer than anyone in town. Not because of the money, because I had earned it. On my way home, I passed a toy store. A beautiful red bicycle stood in the window. I dreamed about owning one for years. For just a moment, I stopped walking. I imagined riding it through town, laughing with my friends, feeling like an ordinary little girl. Then I looked down at the coins in my hand. Without another thought, I kept walking. Dreams could wait. My family couldn't. When I got home, I quietly slipped the money into Mother's apron pocket while she was hanging laundry. She found it a few minutes later. Eleanor, where did this come from? I worked today. Her smile disappeared. You what? I helped Mrs. Carter. Mother knelt in front of me. You should be playing. You should be reading books. You should be climbing trees. Not working. I gently took her hands. But if I can help, why shouldn't I? Tears filled her eyes. She pulled me into a hug so tight, I could barely breathe. I never wanted this life for you, I whispered. I know, but it's our life, and we'll get through it together. That evening, Father called me into his bedroom. He had already heard. Mrs. Carter had told him. He looked disappointed, not angry, heartbroken. Ellie, promise me something, I nodded. If life ever gives you a choice, choose your education, not hard labor. I don't want you growing up like me, I looked at him. But what if our family needs me, he smiled sadly. A family should protect its children, not depend on them. Those words stayed with me for the rest of my life. Because years later, when I became a mother myself, I finally understood exactly what he meant. Over the next few months I worked every Saturday. Sometimes after school, sometimes before sunrise. The little glass jar beside my bed slowly became heavier. Coin by coin, week by week, hope returned to our home. Father smiled a little more often. Mother slept a little better. For the first time, it felt as though we might actually survive. But life has a strange way of testing people. Just when they begin to believe everything will be all right. One snowy afternoon, as I walked home from school, I saw a black car parked outside our house. 2 strangers stood on the front porch. One of them held a thick folder. The other carried a familiar leather briefcase. My heart sank. I had seen that briefcase before. The bank had come back. And this time, they weren't asking questions. You never forget the sound of fear. Sometimes, it isn't a scream. Sometimes, it's the quiet beating of your own heart. As I stood across the street, watching those 2 strangers outside our house, I already knew who they were. The bank had come back. Only this time, they weren't there to negotiate. They were there to finish what they'd started. I ran as fast as I could. My school bag bounced against my back. Snow crunched beneath my shoes. By the time I reached our front porch, Mother had already invited the 2 men inside. Father was sitting quietly at the kitchen table. He looked weaker than I had ever seen him. But something about his face was different. He looked peaceful, almost as though he had already made a decision. One of the men opened his leather briefcase. He carefully removed several documents. Mr. Brooks, we've extended every deadline available. We're truly sorry. But unless payment is made today, the property will officially belong to the bank. The room became completely silent. I looked at Mother. She squeezed Father's hand. Neither of them said a word. Finally, Father slowly stood up. His movements were careful. The doctor had warned him not to strain himself. Yet somehow, he looked taller than ever. He reached into the kitchen drawer, pulled out an old wooden box, and placed it gently on the table. Inside were all the valuables our family still owned. Mother's wedding necklace, Father's pocket watch, his grandfather's silver tools, even the tiny glass jar filled with the coins I had spent months saving. I stared at it. Every Saturday morning, every sore muscle, every dream I'd quietly given up was inside that little jar. Father looked at the bank manager. This is everything we have. If selling these things helps, take them. The manager looked down at the box, then quietly pushed it back toward Father. No, sir. We can't accept personal keepsakes. Father lowered his eyes. I had to ask. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Then something happened that I never expected. The bank manager slowly removed his glasses. He looked around our tiny kitchen, the worn-out chairs, the patched curtains, the old family photographs hanging on the wall. Then he looked directly at my father. My own father was a carpenter. He spoke so softly. It barely sounded like business anymore. I know what hard work looks like, and I know what honest people look like. He closed the folder. I'm not making any promises, but before this property is transferred, I'm going to speak with the regional office one last time. The other employee looked surprised. But sir, the manager interrupted him, some families deserve one final chance. Then both men quietly left the house, the front door closed. Mother covered her face and cried. Not because we had been saved, because, for the first time in months, someone had shown us mercy. Father looked toward me. He smiled gently. You see, Ellie, never mistake kindness for weakness. The world has more good people than bad. They're just harder to notice. That evening, our neighbors began arriving again. Not because anyone had asked them, because word had spread through town. Mrs. Carter brought fresh bread. Mr. Jenkins carried firewood. Mrs. Anderson brought books for me to read. Someone even left a basket of groceries on our porch without saying who it came from. That night, our little house felt warmer than it had in months. Not because the weather had changed, because hope had returned once again. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from the bank. Father carefully opened it while Mother and I watched. His hands trembled. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled. The regional office had approved a temporary payment plan. We could keep our home, as long as the payments continued. Mother hugged Father. I hugged both of them. It felt like our family had been given a second chance. Looking back now, I realized something important. Sometimes, life doesn't rescue you all at once. Sometimes it simply gives you a little more time. And if you're grateful enough, that little bit of time can change everything. For a while, we believed our hardest days were finally behind us. We couldn't have been more wrong, because the following spring, a brand new family moved into the old farmhouse across the road. They had a quiet boy, about my age. He hardly ever smiled. The first time our eyes met, neither of us knew it. But that little boy would one day change the course of my entire life. And that, my sweethearts, is where the next chapter begins.